1. The shadow in the elevator mirror. I heard this story from an older acquaintance who once worked as a night security guard at an old apartment building on the outskirts of Tokyo. His name was Min, a Vietnamese man who had been working in Japan for more than 7 years. Min was not the superstitious type. He had worked on construction sites, guarded warehouses, and slept overnight in places so empty that the only sound was rats running across the ceiling. But there was one incident that made him quit his job that very night, refuse his final month's salary, and never dare to take an elevator alone after midnight again. That apartment building had 12 floors and had been built in the 80s. During the day, it looked ordinary, even a little dull, but at night it was completely different. The corridors were long, the lights were dim yellow, the walls had peeling paint, and the old iron doors stayed shut in silence. Whenever the wind slipped through the gaps of the emergency exits, the whole building echoed with faint groans, as if someone were sighing behind the walls. Min's job was to work from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. every 2 hours. He had to patrol from the basement up to the 12th floor, checking the cameras, the garbage room, the stairwell, and the elevator. In the main lobby, there was an old elevator with scratched stainless steel doors. Inside the elevator was a large mirror that covered almost the entire back wall. At first, Min thought nothing of it, but the former security guards always warned him with a very strange sentence. If you take the elevator after midnight, don't stare into the mirror for too long, especially if you see a person's shadow behind you. Min thought they were joking to scare the newcomer. He only laughed. How could there be someone standing behind him in an elevator without him knowing? If there were, he would see them as soon as he turned around. For the first 2 weeks, everything was peaceful, but one rainy night, it began. That day was cold, and the rain had been falling lightly since the afternoon. Around 1 a.m., Min took his flashlight and went on patrol. He pressed the elevator from the first floor up to the 12th. The doors opened, and inside was empty. Min stepped in, pressed the button for floor 12, and leaned his back against the left wall. The elevator rose slowly. Floor 2, floor 3, floor 4. The old machinery above his head made a low humming sound. Min unconsciously looked into the mirror. In the mirror, he saw himself standing alone. His dark blue security uniform, his slightly crooked cap, his tired eyes. But after only a few seconds, he realized something was wrong. Behind him, in the right corner of the mirror, there seemed to be a dark patch. At first, it looked only like a shadow caused by the elevator light shining at an angle. But the longer Min looked, the more that dark patch seemed to take the shape of a person standing close to the wall. Head slightly lowered, he startled and spun around. There was no one. The elevator was still empty. There was only the cold metallic smell and the distant sound of rain outside the building. Min scolded himself for being paranoid. He turned back to look into the mirror again. The dark patch had disappeared. But from that day on, every time Min took the elevator after midnight, he felt as if the space behind him had grown heavier, as if the air behind his back had thickened, become colder, and someone was standing very close without deliberately touching him. A week later, it became clearer. That night, around 2:20 a.m., Min checked the basement. The apartment basement was very low, with pipes across the ceiling and the smell of dampness and machine oil. After checking the electrical room, he stepped into the elevator to go up to the first floor. The doors closed. Min did not intend to look at the mirror, but the more people try to avoid something, the more easily their eyes glance toward the place they fear most. In the mirror, behind his left shoulder, there was a woman. She stood so close that she seemed almost attached to his back. Long hair fell down, covering her face completely. She wore an old gray coat, soaked as if she had just walked in the rain. Her two arms hung loosely, her head tilted slightly toward Min. The blood in Min's body seemed to freeze. He did not dare turn around. He only stared at the image in the mirror. The elevator ride from the basement to the first floor took only a few seconds. But to Min at that moment, it felt as long as a lifetime. He saw the woman in the mirror slowly raise her head. Not quickly, not suddenly, very slowly. Her wet hair separated strand by strand, revealing a patch of deathly pale skin on her forehead. Then one eye appeared. That eye was not looking at Min in the mirror. It was staring straight at the back of his neck. The moment the elevator gave a ting and the doors opened, Min rushed out. He ran straight to the security room, slammed the door shut, and turned on every light. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He checked the elevator camera. In the footage, there was only him. There was no woman. But what frightened Min even more was that in the camera, his posture looked very strange. He stood stiffly in the middle of the elevator, eyes fixed on the mirror, while his left shoulder sagged slightly as if someone were placing a hand on it. After that night, Min asked to change shifts. The manager refused. They said they were short on staff and told him to endure it for another month. Min needed the money, so he gritted his teeth and continued. But he no longer took the elevator after midnight. He switched to using the stairs. His mistake was thinking the stairwell would be safer. The stairwell of the apartment building was at the end of the corridor and rarely used. The sensor lights flickered on and off. When walking up, every footstep echoed around the concrete walls, sounding like someone was following behind. At first, Min only felt tired, but when he reached around the 7th floor, he heard a second set of footsteps. He stopped. The footsteps also stopped. He continued walking. The footsteps rang out behind him again, one beat slower than his own. Min did not turn around. He remembered the warning: do not stare for too long at the shadow of someone behind you. But the stairwell had no mirror. Only a small glass window on each floor reflected things faintly. When he reached the 9th floor, Min saw on the glass door the shadow of a person standing behind him. Very tall, very thin, long hair hanging down. Min shut his eyes and murmured Buddhist prayers. He quickly climbed to the 12th floor, checked it carelessly, then went back down. Throughout the entire way, those footsteps always followed close behind. From then on, the shadow appeared every night. Not always clearly. Sometimes it was only a shadow passing across a glass surface. Sometimes it was the feeling of cold breath blowing against the back of his neck. Sometimes Min was sitting in the security room, looking at the camera screens, and saw in the 8th floor corridor a black shadow standing still in front of the elevator. But when he zoomed in, the image turned to white static. One night near the end of the month, Min received an internal phone call from the 10th floor. The other end was silent. Min said, "Hello? Who is this?" There was no answer, only the sound of water dripping. Then a woman's whisper, very faint, "Come up here." Min felt a chill down his spine. He looked at the phone panel. The call came from apartment 1004. But apartment 1004 had been vacant for 3 years. Min was about to call the manager, but at that exact moment, all the lobby lights went out. The camera screens turned black. Only the red emergency light blinked. Then the elevator doors opened by themselves. Inside, the lights were on. Empty. But on the mirror at the back, condensation covered the surface as if someone had just breathed onto it. Slowly, on the mirror, a crooked line of writing appeared. "Why won't you look at me?" Min stepped backward. He wanted to run outside, but the main entrance of the building automatically locked after midnight. The key was in the security room, and the security room was right next to the elevator. His phone had no signal. The elevator doors remained open, waiting. Then the button for floor 10 lit up. No one had pressed it. Min did not know why he stepped inside. Later, He said that at that moment his mind was foggy, as if someone were whispering into his ear that he only needed to go up and take a look. Only needed to look once. The elevator doors closed. It went up. Floor 2. Floor 3. Floor 4. In the mirror, behind Min, the woman appeared again. This time, she stood closer than ever, so close that her wet hair touched his shoulder in the reflection. Min clenched his teeth and looked down at the floor, but the stainless steel floor also reflected faintly. He saw 2 pairs of feet. One pair was his security shoes. The other was a pair of deathly pale bare feet, toenails purple, standing right behind his heels. The elevator stopped on the 10th floor. The doors opened. The 10th floor corridor was pitch black, with only the light at the end of the hallway flickering. Apartment 1004 was in the innermost corner. Its door was slightly open. Min stepped out as if hypnotized. With every step toward the apartment, the smell of dampness and wet hair grew stronger. From inside came the sound of running water. Min pushed the door open. The apartment was completely empty. Dust covered the floor, but in the living room, there was a large mirror leaning against the wall. Its surface cracked in one long line from top to bottom. In the mirror, Min saw himself standing at the door, and the woman standing behind him. This time, she no longer lowered her face. Her face was swollen, deathly white, her lips dark purple, her eyes wide open with no whites. Around her neck was a deep mark as if a rope had strangled her. She smiled. Min wanted to turn around, but his entire body was frozen. The woman in the mirror leaned close to his ear. Although in real life he saw no one, Min still heard the voice echo right behind his neck. Look a little longer. At that moment, the phone in Min's pocket turned on its front camera by itself. The screen lit up, reflecting his face and the darkness behind him. On the phone screen, the woman was resting her chin on his shoulder. Min screamed, threw the phone to the floor, and ran. He ran straight down the stairwell, falling several times, tearing open his knees. When he reached the first floor, the main door had somehow opened. He rushed out into the rain and ran to a nearby convenience store, where he sat curled up until morning. The next morning, the manager found Min's phone in apartment 1004. The front camera was still on. In the gallery, there was a new photo taken at 2:44 a.m. In the photo, Min stood before the mirror, his face pale with fear. Behind him was the long-haired woman. But the most terrifying thing was not her. It was that behind the woman in the mirror, there were many other shadows, crowded inside the empty apartment, all lowering their heads and staring at Min. Later, Min learned that many years earlier, a woman had hanged herself in apartment 1004 after being abandoned by her husband. People said that before she died, she often complained that she always felt someone standing behind her in the mirror. Min quit his job immediately, but the story did not end there. A few months later, he moved. One night, while brushing his teeth in the bathroom, he accidentally looked into the mirror. Behind him, on the white tile floor, there was a very faint human shadow. He immediately turned around. There was no one. But when he looked back into the mirror, on the layer of steam covering the glass, a small line of writing appeared. "You saw me." From then on, Min covered every mirror in his house with cloth. He never stood with his back turned in front of a reflective surface. He told me, "There are things that only need you to see them once, and they will know how to follow you. The shadow behind you is not frightening because it stands there. It is frightening because it waits for you to look long enough to recognize it." 2. The person standing behind them in the wedding photo. In my hometown, there is a story adults still whisper whenever someone is preparing for a wedding, when taking wedding photos. If you see a strange shadow behind the bride and groom, absolutely do not zoom in to look, because the longer you look, the clearer it becomes. And once its face becomes clear, that wedding will no longer be a wedding for the living. The story happened in a coastal district in central Vietnam. The main person involved was Han, a bridal makeup artist. She had been doing the job for more than 10 years, traveling to do makeup from early morning until midnight, even entering homes where the chill of a recent funeral had not yet faded to prepare brides for rushed weddings after a death. But there was one wedding that haunted her to this day. The bride's name was Lan, 24 years old, gentle and quiet. The groom's name was Tuan, a long-distance driver. The two had loved each other for 3 years before getting married. The bride's house was near an old road leading to the village cemetery, where old casuarina trees rustled all year round like people whispering. The night before the wedding, Han came to do Lan's trial makeup. Lan's house was crowded, brightly lit, full of lively voices and laughter. But strangely, the bride's room was very cold. Even though the windows were closed, the curtains still occasionally bulged as if wind were blowing from outside. As Han was drawing Lan's eyeliner, the bride suddenly asked softly, "Sis, while you're doing my makeup, do you see anyone standing behind me?" Han froze. In the vanity mirror, there was only Lan sitting on the chair and Han standing behind her. Further behind was the wardrobe, the wedding bed, and the wedding photo hanging on the wall. Han smiled to reassure her. "There's no one, dear. You're probably just too nervous." Lan was silent for a while, then said, "These past few days, I keep feeling someone standing behind me. At first, I thought it was my mother or my younger sister. But when I turned around, no one was there." Han felt a chill on the back of her neck but said nothing more. In the wedding business, the thing she avoided most was saying unlucky things before the wedding day. After finishing the makeup, Lan stood up to try on her dress. It was a long white dress with a lace collar. Very beautiful. When Lan turned in front of the mirror, Han caught a glimpse in the mirror of a black shadow standing close to the bedroom door. Only for an instant. A tall, thin man, head slightly lowered. Han turned around immediately. The doorway was empty. She thought perhaps someone had passed through the hallway. But afterward, Lan looked into the mirror and her face went pale. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Han tried to remain calm. "Saw what?" Lan swallowed. "He's standing behind me." "Who?" Lan did not answer. She only lowered her head, both hands gripping the hem of her dress. That night, before leaving, Han heard Lan's mother scolding her daughter in the kitchen. "Tomorrow is your wedding. Don't bring up the past anymore. The dead are dead. You have to live your own life." That sentence stayed in Han's mind. The next morning, Han arrived at 4 a.m. It was still dark, and mist covered the yard. The bride's family had already set up the wedding tent, and the speakers were testing wedding music with a crackling sound. Lan sat before the vanity, wearing a white robe, her face pale as if she had not slept all night. While Han combed her hair, Lan said softly, "Last night I dreamed of Nam." Han asked, "Who is Nam?" Lan looked down at her hands. "My ex-boyfriend. He died 2 years ago. A motorcycle accident, right on the road to the cemetery." Han was silent. Lan said that before she knew Tuan, she had once loved Nam. They had loved each other since high school. But Lan's family did not approve because Nam was poor and often jealous. After one argument, Lan broke up with him. That night, Nam got drunk, rode his motorcycle to look for her, and crashed into a truck. People found Nam dead less than a kilometer from Lan's house. Ever since Lan began preparing for the wedding, she had repeatedly dreamed of Nam standing behind her. In the dream, he said nothing, only looked at her through the mirror. The closer the wedding day came, the closer Nam stood in the dream. After hearing this, Han could only advise, "You're probably just feeling guilty. Today is your happy day. Don't think about it anymore." But when she fastened the veil for Lan, The light bulb in the room suddenly flickered 3 times. At the same moment, the vanity mirror fogged over as if steam had covered it. On the surface of the mirror appeared a long streak, like the mark of a hand dragging from top to bottom. Lan burst into tears. Han called the family in. Lan's mother immediately took a towel and wiped the mirror, muttering, "Don't disturb her anymore. She has suffered enough." The wedding still went on. Around 9 a.m., the groom's procession arrived. Tuan wore a black suit and smiled brightly. But as soon as he stepped into the bride's room, his expression changed slightly. He looked over Lan's shoulder, toward the corner of the room. Lan asked, "What's wrong?" Tuan shook his head. "Nothing. I thought someone was standing there." The bridal procession took place normally. Everyone took photos non-stop. There was a young photographer accompanying the groom's family. He took many photos inside the bride's room, in the yard, and in front of the ancestral altar. By the time the wedding car left the bride's house, Han thought everything was over. But that afternoon, the photographer called Han. His voice was trembling. "Sis, this morning at the bride's house, did you see anyone dressed in black standing behind the bride?" Han went cold. He sent her a photo. It was a photo of Lan and Tuan standing before the ancestral altar, both bowing their heads for the ceremony. Behind them were relatives from both sides. But in the left corner of the photo, right behind Lan, there was the shadow of a man in black. His face was blurred, but his posture was very clear. His head was lowered. His arms hung down. The strange thing was that he stood in a very narrow space, where no one should have been able to squeeze in. The people around seemed not to notice him. The photographer said, "I checked the other photos too. Any photo where the bride appears alone or standing beside the groom, that person is behind her." He sent more photos. A photo of Lan sitting for makeup. The shadow stood behind the curtain. A photo of Lan fastening the wedding flowers. The shadow reflected in the mirror. A photo of Lan stepping out to the wedding car. The shadow stood right behind the gate. A photo of Lan and Tuan smiling in front of the wedding car. The shadow sat in the back seat of the car. In a dark space, Han looked at each photo, her hands shaking. That night, the wedding feast was held at the groom's house. Han did not attend, but around 10 p.m., Lan's mother called her, sobbing. Lan fainted. She keeps screaming that someone is standing behind her. Han hurried over. The groom's house was in chaos. Lan had been laid down in the bridal chamber, still wearing her wedding dress, her face white as paper. Tuan sat beside her, also terrified. According to everyone, while cutting the wedding cake, Lan suddenly froze. She looked at the silver knife in her hand, where something behind her was faintly reflected. Then she screamed, "Nam, don't stand behind me anymore." After that, Lan fainted. When she woke up, she absolutely refused to enter the bridal chamber. She said someone was inside waiting. That person stood in the dark corner beside the wardrobe, head lowered, clothes soaked in blood. Both families thought Lan was under stress. An aunt from the groom's side even scolded, "On your wedding day, you keep mentioning your ex. Don't you know what should be avoided?" But as soon as she finished speaking, the bedside lamp turned on and off repeatedly by itself. The wedding photo hanging on the wall fell, and the glass cracked. In the photo, Lan and Tuan stood by the sea. Far behind Lan, a tiny shadow stood beneath the casuarina trees. Lan's mother saw it and collapsed to her knees. She began crying and speaking into the empty air. "Nam, I beg you, don't drag her with you. She was wrong, but she is still alive." The room fell completely silent. Then from behind Lan came a sigh. No one clearly saw anything, but everyone heard it. The wedding ended in chaos. That night, Lan did not sleep with Tuan. She stayed with her mother in another room. Tuan, out of pride and because he did not believe in ghosts, decided to sleep alone in the bridal chamber. The next morning, people found Tuan sitting frozen in front of the vanity mirror. He was not dead, but the hair at both temples had turned white in patches. On his neck were purple bruises like finger marks. When people asked what had happened, Tuan only repeated over and over, "It stood behind me all night. It made me look. I didn't turn around, but it was in the mirror. It kept getting closer." After that, Tuan said that around 2 a.m., he woke because he heard water dripping in the bathroom. He opened his eyes and saw, in the wardrobe mirror, a man standing behind him. He thought it was an illusion, so he looked carefully. The more he looked, the clearer the man's face became. It was a young man with a face covered in blood, his neck bent crookedly, one eye crushed. The man looked at Tuan through the mirror and smiled. Tuan wanted to turn around but could not move. The man leaned close to his ear and said, "She used to be mine." Right after that, Tuan felt two ice-cold hands squeezing his neck. He fainted. He only woke up in the morning. After that incident, Lan and Tuan separated after only 3 days of marriage. Lan's family invited a spiritual master to perform rituals. They set up an altar at the road where Nam had died, burned paper clothes and votive money, and begged Nam to let go. During the ritual, Lan cried until she fainted. She apologized to Nam, saying she had never wanted him to die. It seemed everything calmed down. But a few months later, Han received news that Lan had gone missing. She left home in the late afternoon, saying she was going to the market, then never returned. People found her motorbike near the road to the cemetery. On the seat lay her phone. Inside the phone was one final selfie. The photo showed Lan standing in front of the casuarina trees at dusk. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. Behind her, a man in black stood very close, so close that his chin almost touched her shoulder. This time, his face was very clear. It was Nam. But the most terrifying thing was that Lan was not looking into the camera. Her eyes were turned slightly to one side, as if she were looking at some reflection in front of her. Under the photo, Lan had typed a line of text but had not sent it to anyone. "I see you now. Please stop standing behind me." From then on, no one ever found Lan. People in the village say that on rainy nights, if you pass the road to the cemetery, you may sometimes see a girl in a white dress standing beside the casuarina trees. Behind her is a man in black. Both of them lowered their heads and looked down at the water pooled on the road, as if looking into a mirror. And if someone stops their motorbike and stares too long at their shadows in the puddle, the man in black will slowly raise his head. He does not look at the girl. He looks at the person looking at him.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
3. The shadow behind you in room number 7. This story happened to a group of students renting a room near an old industrial zone. The person who told it was Fong, who at the time was a second-year university student. Fong once insisted he did not believe in ghosts at all, until he stayed in room number 7 of Mrs. Tam's boarding house. The boarding house was at the end of a small alley. On both sides of the alley were mossy walls, tangled electric wires, and at night the streetlight glowed only faintly. The boarding house had 10 rooms, but room number 7 was always closed. Mrs. Tam said the room was damp and had not been repaired, so she did not rent it out. But after Tet, there were few tenants, and Fong and his 2 friends, Hoi and Duck, needed a cheap room. Mrs. Tam reluctantly rented room number 7 to them at a much lower price. She only warned, "There is an old mirror in the room. If you don't like it, cover it with cloth. Don't stare into it too long late at night." Fong laughed. "It's just a mirror, Auntie. What could happen?" Room number 7 was small, with yellowed walls and an old tile floor. In the corner stood a full-length mirror, almost as tall as a person, with a black wooden frame whose paint had peeled. The surface of the mirror was slightly cloudy and did not reflect as clearly as a normal mirror. When standing before it, one always had the feeling that the image in the mirror was a little slower than oneself. Duck was the first to notice. One evening, after showering, Duck stood in front of the mirror drying his hair. He raised his right hand, and the reflection in the mirror also raised its right hand. But when Duck lowered his hand, the figure in the mirror lowered it about half a second later. Duck called Fawn. "Come here and look, this mirror is strange." Fawn looked but saw nothing. Hoi said, "It's an old mirror. The glass is warped." Things stopped there until the fourth night. Around 1 a.m., all three were asleep when Fawn woke because he needed to urinate. The room was dark, with only light from the alley slipping through the gap in the door. When Fawn sat up, he accidentally looked at the mirror opposite the bed. In the mirror, Fawn saw himself sitting up. Hoi and Duck were still sleeping. But behind Fawn, right beside the head of the bed, there was the shadow of a person squatting. The shadow was very black, blacker than the darkness in the room. Its head was lowered, its abnormally long arms resting on its knees. Fawn froze. He slowly turned around. There was no one behind him, only the damp-stained wall. Fawn looked back at the mirror. The shadow had disappeared. The next morning, Fawn told his two friends. Hoi burst out laughing, saying Fawn had stayed up too late gaming and was seeing things. Duck, however, was silent. After a while, Duck said, "I saw it too." The whole room went quiet. Duck said that the night before, while he was studying, he saw in the laptop screen a shadow reflected behind him. He thought Hoi was standing there to prank him, but when he turned around, no one was there. When he looked into the mirror, he saw that shadow standing in the corner of the room, its head tilted completely to one side. Hoi still did not believe it. That night, Hoi decided to test it. He placed his phone to record video in front of the mirror, then turned off the light, and all three sat facing the mirror in the dark. At first, nothing happened. The three of them laughed and joked to drown out the fear. But the longer they sat, the colder the air in the room became. The sound of vehicles outside the alley slowly faded. Even the distant barking of dogs fell silent. About 10 minutes later, a black streak appeared in the mirror behind Hoi. Fawn saw it clearly but did not dare say anything. The black streak rose higher, like someone slowly standing up behind Hoi. Its head was lowered, hair or something similar hanging down and covering its face. Its two arms were long enough to nearly reach its knees. Hoi was still staring at the mirror. He forced a smile. "Do you guys see it now?" No one answered. The black shadow in the mirror slowly bent down, close to Hoi's shoulder. Then it placed a hand on his shoulder. In real life, Hoi's shirt shoulder sank down as if something were truly pressing on it. Hoi screamed, jumped up, and rushed out of the room. Fawn and Duck ran after him. The three stood in the yard, gasping. When they reviewed the video, the screen only showed the three of them sitting before the mirror. There was no black shadow, but at the 11th minute, the audio had captured a very faint whisper. "Don't look anymore." After that night, they covered the mirror with a towel. But covering the mirror did not make everything disappear. On the contrary, it made the shadow step out of the mirror. The next night, Fawn was sleeping when he heard the sound of fingernails lightly scratching the wall. He opened his eyes. The sound was coming from the mirror covered by the towel. Scritch, scritch, scritch. As if someone were standing behind the cloth, using fingernails to scratch the glass. Fawn shook Hoi and Duck awake. The three turned on the light. The scratching immediately stopped. On the towel covering the mirror, a long wet streak appeared from top to bottom, like the mark of a hand dragging across it. Hoi, angry, pulled the towel down. The mirror beneath was covered in steam. On it was a line of writing. Why won't you look at me?" Duck was so terrified that he demanded they move rooms immediately. But it was nearly 3 a.m., heavy rain was falling, and the three could only sit awake until morning. Throughout those hours, they heard footsteps pacing back and forth inside the room, even though all three were sitting close to the door. The next morning, Fawn asked Mrs. Tam about the person who had once lived in room number 7. At first, she denied everything, but when Fawn said he would call the police because he suspected something unusual had happened in the room, she finally told them. 3 years earlier, room number 7 had once been rented by a girl. Her name was Mai, and she worked in a garment factory. Mai lived alone and rarely interacted with others. People said she had been betrayed by her boyfriend, and after that became withdrawn. Before she died, she often told the neighbors that there was someone standing behind her in the mirror. Everyone thought she was stressed. One night, the whole boarding house heard a scream from room number 7. When they broke the door open, they found Mai dead in front of the mirror. She was sitting on the floor, eyes wide open and staring into the glass. The strange thing was that there were bruises on her neck as if she had been strangled. But the room was locked from the inside, with no sign that anyone had entered. After she died, the mirror should have been thrown away, but Mrs. Tam did not want to waste it, so she kept it in the room. After hearing this, Hoy angrily demanded that Mrs. Tam throw the mirror away immediately. Mrs. Tam called 2 men from the neighborhood to carry it out. But as soon as they touched the mirror, one man's hand was cut, even though the frame was not sharp. Blood dripped onto the glass. The moment the drop of blood touched the mirror, the whole room lost power. In the darkness, Fawn heard a woman laugh softly. Not from the yard, but right behind him. When the lights came back on, the towel covering the mirror had fallen. In the mirror, Fawn saw the whole group standing crowded in the room, but behind them, there was a long-haired girl, her face deathly white, her neck dark purple, staring straight at him. No one turned around, because everyone saw her in the mirror. Mrs. Tam collapsed, repeatedly apologizing. "Mai, I was wrong. I shouldn't have kept the mirror." That afternoon, they invited a ritual master to come. As soon as he stepped into the room, he frowned. He said that inside the mirror was not only Mai's spirit, something else had attached itself to the mirror long before, and Mai was only the person it had dragged in. The ritual master said, "An old mirror left for a long time in the room of a dead person can easily become a door. But this door does not open outward. It opens behind the back of the person looking into it." Fawn did not understand that sentence until the final night. According to the master, they had to cover the mirror with red cloth, paste talismans on it, and the next morning bring it to the cemetery to burn with offerings. But before the ritual, absolutely no one was allowed to look into the mirror. That night, Fawn, Hoy, and Duck decided to sleep in the room next door. Room number 7 was locked. The mirror had been fully covered. Around 2 a.m., Fawn woke because he heard Hoy whispering, "Fawn, wake up." Fawn opened his eyes. Hoy was not lying beside him. Duck had also disappeared. The door of the neighboring room was slightly open. From the hallway came Duke's crying voice. "It called me. It said just look for a little while." Fawn rushed out. The door to room number 7 was wide open. Inside was pitch black. Hoy and Duck stood before the mirror. The red cloth had been pulled halfway down. Both of them stood motionless, their eyes fixed on the glass. Fawn shouted, "What are you two doing?" No one answered. Fawn ran in and pulled Hoy away, but when he touched his friend's shoulder, he felt that Hoi's shoulder was ice cold. In the mirror, behind Hoy and Duck, there was not only the girl named Mai. There were also many other shadows. They stood in layers behind the three of them, so many that the mirror seemed to sink endlessly into darkness. All of them lowered their heads, except for one tall, thin black shadow standing closest. It had no face, only an empty patch of darkness. Its two hands rested on Hui's and Duke's shoulders. Then it raised its head and looked at Fong. Although it had no eyes, Fong knew it was looking at him. A voice echoed inside his head. "You saw me too." Fong panicked and yanked Hui and Duck hard. Both fell to the floor. At that exact moment, the mirror cracked open with a loud split. From the crack, something like a pitch-black hand reached out and gripped the edge of the glass. Fong screamed until his throat went hoarse. Mrs. Tam and the other tenants came running. The ritual master was also called urgently. As soon as he entered, he shouted for everyone to turn their faces away and not look at the mirror. Then he threw the entire incense bowl at the glass. The mirror shattered, but when the pieces of glass fell to the floor, no one saw their own reflection in them. In each shard, there was only a solid black color, as if inside was not glass, but tiny holes leading to some place without light. The next morning, the mirror was taken and burned in an empty lot behind the cemetery. When the flames rose, everyone heard the crackling of glass mixed with the sound of a woman crying. Fong said that for one moment, in the black smoke, he saw Mai standing with her back to them. Behind Mai was a very tall black shadow, placing its hand on her shoulder. Then both disappeared. Fong, Hui, and Duck moved out that same day. They thought everything had ended, but it had not. About a month later, Fong discovered that whenever he passed reflective surfaces such as supermarket glass doors, a dark phone screen, or rainwater, he always saw a very faint shadow behind him. It did not appear as clearly as before. It only stood far away. But every time Fong accidentally looked for more than a few seconds, it came a little closer. Fong once tried shaving his head, changing rooms, moving to another city, even not using mirrors for half a year. But the shadow was still there. In the black screen of his laptop, in the train window, in the stainless steel spoon while eating. Once, Fong messaged me around 3 a.m. "It doesn't need the mirror anymore. Once you've seen it, every reflection becomes a door." Fong's final message was a photo of his turned-off phone screen. The black screen faintly reflected Fong's face. Behind him, there was a shadow standing close. This time, it was no longer lowering its head. And in the note beneath the photo, Fong wrote, "Never look too long at the shadow of the person behind you. Because if you look long enough, it will understand that you have allowed it to step in."
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.